will seek to implement these very important principles. Thank you for hearing and answering in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, Doc, for the last few weeks, I believe last week we had a rebroadcast because of some unavoidable circumstances, but we are delighted to be back live today again. And for the last few weeks, we have been talking about this matter of taking one's marriage for granted. It sometimes become easy when we don't. I think our last discussion was this matter of not setting boundaries with others. You know, here is a man who is accustomed to saying yes, and so everybody that asks him to do something, he complies, and then his spouse begins to realize that there's an issue with his presence, there's an issue with his involvement in various things, and it's impacting the marriage.
Yeah, certainly, you know, as we recap just a little bit, we consider that when a person is unable to set boundaries, you know, with others, it really puts them in a very awkward position and really puts their relationship at risk as well. Meaning that, you know, the time and energy and emotional input that they should be giving to their own marriage, they are unable to do because they're spending that time with other people and doing other things, and that can significantly damage a relationship. So very, very important as we continue to contemplate how critical it is to be able to set a boundary to protect yourself and your relationship.
I perceive that sometimes people may be concluding that, you know, my spouse is so committed, and you know, I trust my spouse so much, and my spouse trusts me so much that I don't need to worry about her feeling threatened by the presence of somebody else. Sometimes we make these in good faith. We say these things, but is that safe? Not from the sense that we are going to go overboard and become unfaithful, but what does it do to the relationship? Is it fair? Maybe I should ask rather than safe. Is it fair for me, because I know that my spouse is understanding and trusting and not threatened by perhaps another lady asking me to do something for her? Is it fair to her to be so consumed with others that I'm literally neglecting her?
Well, we can begin by answering and saying that it's not fair. I think what can happen oftentimes is that because you know, you sense that your spouse is understanding, what you may not recognize inadvertently is that the relationship there's a lot of space developing in that relationship where because you are not connecting at the levels that you need to connect. You're not building emotional intimacy because, you know, you're creating these gaps, I should say, that now has a long-term impact on the relationship. So yes, there may be no issues with infidelity and trust issues in terms of the space that's been or the distance that is there, but obviously you are creating space and gaps in the relationship that can have an impact long term. Because sometimes, Doc, you know, the biggest problem in a relationship sometimes is not the physical act or the physical connectedness, but the emotional connectedness. When you get to 25 and 30 years, and then you're looking at the relationship and you're thinking, I don't feel connected to this person, you know, due to the fact that you have not spent the time doing the emotional work, then you can have a challenge.
I think that is so very important, Dr. Braithwaite, that I wish we could spend maybe another minute or two on that. Yeah. The emotional cost.
Yes.
And perhaps as we consider that, you know, I really wish that our listeners and viewers would give attention to this. Because my spouse and I may be okay, you know. In fact, for that matter, we may be both busy with work and other engagements, and we don't take the time to consider that the bonding that should be there, you know, the occasions for emotional bonding, and when that is not nurtured in a meaningful way, then there is that gap that is widening gradually, And as you said, when you spoke just now, I remember reading a poem that is attributed to no one, author unknown, but the poem speaks about the wall and how this husband and wife drew apart so gradually that
Mhm.
one day the man woke up to discover that there was a wall between the two of them, a wall that he described as unscalable. It
Mm.
was just it didn't come overnight, but because it rose so gradually, he did not realize that
Recognize.
until it was too late. And so that, I think, is something that we need to give consideration to in these kinds of situations when we allow all these intruders into our relationships and create that widening gap, when we are not spending sufficient time with our spouses and we are not creating that bond, that naturalness that we're supposed to have, where we can just connect and talk.
Yeah, I think, the word that we're kind of focusing on here is the inadvertent, gradual nature of that wall that you spoke about. And the fact that we do not recognize that the actions that we take or the inactions that we take can cause that wall to grow gradually, so that you're not really observing it, but then you do sense the distance, as I spoke about earlier, sometime later. And sometimes by that time it is almost too late because the individuals have almost developed different lives, while in the same house, in the same building. They can develop totally different lives and different experiences that create a significant challenge. So it's such an important point to discover and to discuss, regarding how people can grow apart, when we tend to take each other for granted, even though we may not be fearful of any consequences, such as you mentioned, infidelity, but the consequence of the brokenness is significant.
Yeah, and a lot of times, to be direct, to be realistic, uh, infidelity doesn't happen in a vacuum. A lot of
Absolutely not.
people seem not to realize that when a relationship gets to the point where there's infidelity, there are underlying causes. There are things that many times drive. I mean, whenever you create, if there is no space between husband and wife, then nobody can fit in. But as
Right.
you create space between, the more space you have, the easier it is for somebody to fit in. And what we are saying is that one needs to remember that your relationship is not in crisis only when there is infidelity.
Mm.
Um, the
Yeah, good point. Very
gradual
good point.
shift away from each other is a very serious thing that one needs to give attention to. I remember reading some years ago, Doc, of a little boy who was walking by a dam and saw a little water seeping through, and he stuck his finger in there. And he became a hero because it starts with a trickle, and then that little space gets wider and wider until the dam cracks
Mm.
and a whole community may be
Mhm.
wiped out. So a lot of times our marriages have these little cracks, and because they're small, we may sometimes even see the water dripping, but we think, oh, that's small, and we ignore it. And that is when we have occasion to do some repair work before it gets
Right,
worse.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is so so crucial. And that journey of the repair work is, I guess, what we're doing here, Doc, as we talk from week to week. We're trying to engender the repair work. We're pushing our finger in that little crack, to prevent the entire dam from collapsing.
Mhm.
And that's why marriage encounter is so important, because it helps us to see the little cracks, and to bring attention to them, so that couples can grow and improve and do better, along this journey, which I think is so so very important. Which I think is so very important.
Yeah, I don't know that we can overemphasize the importance of this. And I'm really hoping that those who are listening will really give serious attention. Doc, there's just another point I want to. I believe last time we were here live, we spoke to the matter that it is a serious thing to take our spouses for granted. We said that safety was never meant as a rationalization for neglecting the love obligation, because we're safe with our spouse because we know that our spouse isn't going anywhere. That is no reason for us to neglect the obligation we have to nurture and to cherish. And I think it's just important for us to reemphasize that point.
Well, you know, that very act, and let me just talk about some of the basic things that we ought to be or pay attention to. You know, the birthdays, the anniversaries, the special moments, to nurture thoughtfulness, care, and love. You know, but apart from those special moments, the willingness to support and assist in the various activities of the home, just with chores, the work outside, the work inside, the act of caring for the important aspects of the day-to-day experience, you know, putting gas in the vehicle, ensuring that the vehicle is working correctly, for your spouse, you know, checking up on each other throughout the course of the day. You know, there are persons who, and maybe for some this is natural, but it does sort of speak to the whole issue of drawing or growing apart. You leave home at 8 o'clock in the morning and you never hear from your spouse again until you get back home at 5 or 5:30. You know, those may be considered as simple, but they're very important in terms of growing the togetherness in a relationship. And so, you know, nurturing those things, really, really crucial, Doc. You know, a lot of people take them for granted, and think that, you know, it's all right, you know, we'll get by, whatever the case may be. But you do that for 365 and a quarter days of a year over a 10-year period, I can guarantee you that you're going to have some breakdown in that relationship.
I think one of the dangers in a situation like that you're describing there, and I'm glad we're talking about the little things, because, you know, I had occasion to tell somebody just yesterday, Doc, that the little things in marriage are really the big things in terms of determining whether or not the relationship is going to be strong or weak.
Yeah.
And again, I want to emphasize the fact that if you're waiting until something big happens to sound the alarm bell, then you know, when that big thing happens, the distance between both of you will by that time be so far that it's going to be really difficult to put you back together again. So, you know, you're mentioning somebody leaving home at 8 a.m. and they're getting home at 5, 6, 7 p.m. And not once during the day do they pick up the phone and call or send a message and say, how are you? You know, just checking in, that kind of thing. What happens when we don't give attention to these things is that we get accustomed to living without the other person. And to make matters worse, you may even go home and carry home some work, or go home to another assignment where you're, and these days with the technology, you're home and your spouse is on Facebook and you're on something else, and still there is not the bonding. And people may not be realizing that they're conditioning themselves to live apart, to live independent lives of each other, until maybe the children go and you know, you get to this retirement age and discover, you know, I had a very eye-opening experience, Doc. Once I went to a particular country and there was a court case of an important figure, and I said, I'm going to go because it was open to the public. I'm going to go to view this case. And when I got there, they postponed the hearing. So I said, since I was going to court, let me go to just, if I may, see some other court cases. And in this particular country, they had a hall of justice, you know, so you had the privilege of seeing divorce court and criminal court and those kinds of things. And the clerk there, that they was very kind to me. I don't know if it's because I was dressed a certain way, but They offered me the security officer, and where do you want to go? I will escort you to where you want to go, and that kind of thing. So when I got to the divorce court area, I was amazed to see so many persons in their 60s and 70s in divorce court. You know,
Wow.
I said to myself, I thought I would see young people in their mid
Younger
40s at
people.
first, thing, but these are people who are past retirement. And then it
Right.
occurred to me, they were holding on for children, holding on for this and that. But then because they did not nurture the togetherness and build fun memories, they're total strangers now they get to retirement.
Right, right. Yeah, and that is exactly the danger that of which we speak. You know, even more disturbing is the fact that a number of married people, Doc, and maybe you're aware of this too, a number of married people live in the same home but in different rooms. You know, they operate from different places in the house because they find it more comfortable based on maybe their living styles, time of sleep, their work agendas, to actually operate out of a totally different room. And you mentioned earlier that, people grow accustomed to living separately, which is exactly what happens when you don't communicate, when you do not reach out to each other, when you do not remember or consider, the little special times and special moments, and when you move into another bedroom. You are you may I mean it's equivalent, Doc, to a married couple living in separate apartments.
Certainly, Doc. I'm smiling here because I heard some research um in a documentary that indicated that individuals who sleep by themselves get better sleep, or report that they sleep more comfortably. So if you
Okay.
take the husband and the wife apart, that they sleep more comfortably. And I smile at that because I said, oh, that's an interesting research. I don't know that that is the same with me. I I'm not sure about that, but the sacrifice is what we're talking about here. You may decide, okay, my spouse is a late sleeper, I'm an early sleeper. If I go to a different room to sleep, that apartness is impacting the relationship. There's a kind of bonding. And if I go back to a mother and a baby, a mother or even a father holding a child, a young child on his chest, it creates physical bonding, which has some relationship with emotional bonding likewise. And so your presence in the same bed at night, when you can lie down and pillow talk and chit chat, if you're in separate quarters, that's not happening. And so the
Right.
emotional damage that you're doing out of the convenience of not wanting to hear television, or coming in a little later than the other person, you have to measure all of these in terms of the marriage. We are married. We can't think of the individual apart from the relationship. This is about making the marriage a priority and investing in the marriage. And sometimes we have to give up a little something here and there for the sake of a strong, healthy marriage relationship.
But I think you made a point that I think is so significant, and that is that if you're in the same room on the same bed, if you are emotionally connected, I can guarantee that you'd sleep better than if you're not. And I think that's the case. Some people cannot be on the same bed or do not sleep well on the same bed because they have emotional breakdown. And
Mhm.
it's terrible to be in the presence or forced to hug somebody or to be close to somebody who you are emotionally distant from. You can imagine two people who have fallen out and you tell them hug each other. It's the most uncomfortable thing in the world, right? So the fact that you are on a bed with somebody who you may not be emotionally connected to may be quite painful. And that is so important because if you do not nurture your connectedness, then that would be your nightly experience, and you could understand why somebody might want to be in a different room. So, I think these things speak very loudly and very clearly to how important it is for us to take the time to nurture connectedness. And you know, just recently in a seminar, one gentleman was speaking about using, you know, technology is so amazing, using a device to measure certain brain waves to determine how comfortable you are or how invested you are in certain things. And I can imagine if they were to use that same device and put two people in the same room, the brain waves may suggest that they really don't like each other very much. um, you know, or they're not very connected, and as a result, they may not want to spend a lot of time together. So I think that what's important, Doc, is that as we engage in the marital experience, we should really take time to nurture the relationship so that we can actually love the person that we live with.
I don't want to overburden this point, Dr. Braithwaite, but again, I think it is really important. You know, when you are alone and I'm going back to the matter of me sleeping in one room and my wife sleeping in another room. When I'm in that room by myself, the temptations of doing so many other things, getting accustomed to being by myself, finding my own activities. You know, we are taking away from occasion to reason things out, to bond and to build sharedness. When a marriage breaks down, or one of the signs of breakdown in marriage is when two people begin to do their individual things, living separate lives. And so I want to make the appeal to individuals to not to overlook these little things that we're talking about. Calling up your spouse, find out how they're doing. You know, find occasion to eat one meal together every day, at least. You know, I know we're busy people sometimes, our schedules don't come together as nicely as we would like them to, but try to make the sacrifice to arrange to have the occasion to sit down together and eat at least one meal every day, minus the distractions of other things, so that you can share and talk and bond. And sometimes, you know, if the togetherness, you spoke some time ago, Dr. Braithwaite, about using different vehicles, you know, to go to the same destination, which is another one, because we become so independent that we're going to the same church, we're going to the same store, but we're going in two different vehicles. And what we're doing there is that we're cutting down on the time. Our time is up, I just realized, but we're cutting down on the time that we have to connect together.
Yes, yes. It's the truth. And I mean, while our time is up, you know, it's really critical. Some of these things that people consider as really minor or minute, when they have that cumulative effect, it becomes serious and can definitely hurt significantly relational and emotional connectedness.
Well, friends, that's all the time we have for today. We want to encourage you to join us next week when we continue this very important discussion. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, Marriage Encounter at slcadventist.org. Until next week, that's all the time we have for today.